Hello and welcome to the Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always here at the Pig and Whistle Inn in Stormwind, I go for a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. So grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy. Today we're going to be going over what to look forward to in Dragonflight. Now Dragonflight has been released, the announcement of its release has been released, and the date for this is the 28th of November, I believe. So the 28th of November is when we will get Dragonflight. We will get our hands on it. We'll get the new talents. We'll get the new profession systems. We'll get the new zones, dragon riding. And these are the four main factors that I'm going to be talking about, why we look forward to them, what they could bring, and going forward, the potential for them, essentially. As always, we have the weekly news. So the bosses for this week, the world bosses, are Nurgash Muckformed, Morgeth and Antros, all in their respective zones of... Nurgash is in Revendrethia. Morgeth is in the Moor, and Antroth is in Zereth Mortis. The fated raids for this week are... What's the Nathrius one? Castle Nathria, that's it. And Nurgash Muckformed is your world boss that is fated. So make sure you kill them, get them downed these raids for the best gear that you can, item level wise, as well as some anima and other bits and pieces. Arena Skirmish is your bonus event for this week, so you earn more honour doing these arena skirmishes. Warsong Scramble is your brawl for this week. This one's really fun. You need 10 flags to win the game, and essentially each base has 3 flags. You can just continuously run them. So person who can, if you've got 3 warriors all with the heroic leap legendary just bounding across the map, then it can definitely be a lot easier for your team. But it's essentially cap 10 flags as quickly as possible. There's no real PvP in it, but if you really want to, you can have some like brawling in the middle of the map. Inspiring, Quaking, Tyrannical and Shrouded are your mythic affixes for this week. Inspiring, you essentially have to see, there'll be one mob that is emboldened. Essentially you want to crowd control this mob or kill it very fast, as this mob means that the other mobs around it within a certain radius, 10 yards, 20 yards, whatever it is, cannot be CC'd or interrupted. So you need to make sure that this mob that is inspiring is killed very quickly or is CC'd itself. Quaking, very simple, don't stand next to anyone else, and make sure you aren't casting when the quaking is about to go off, as it will lock your spell casting. Tyrannical, the bosses and the mobs that the boss summons are a bit tankier, so make sure that you bring a boss build. You know, it's going to be a lot tougher on stuff that have a lot of health, such as what's the dungeon? Necrotic Wake is one that comes to mind with the last boss, the second or the third boss, as well. And Shrouded is your seasonal affix, your Season 4 seasonal affix. The Nathrazim are hiding within the mobs. You find them and kill them to gain a stat increase, and this can go up for quite a while, up to like 30%-ish for your stat of your choosing, so it is well worth trying to find them. And the history of the spell that we're going to be looking at is Judgment. Now, Judgment, you think, okay, there's surely not been a lot, probably like the same as Lay on Hands or Blessing of Protection, there's not a lot of changes. Well, I didn't think there was either, but apparently there is. So it obviously started back in 2004. It was moved to level 4. And, when they got this spell, Paladins, essentially this was their entire DPS kit for the whole of Classic. Yeah, poor Paladins, man, in Classic. Poor Rep Paladins, they did not have a fun time. It got its first change in 2005, a year later. Judgment of Light and Judgment of Wisdom will now benefit players that are immune to holy effects, such as Divine Shield. It got its first change in Wrath in 3.2. This is 3 years after that change. Removed in favour of multiple use-specific judgment spells. And these judgment spells are Judgment of Justice, Judgment of Light, and Judgment of Freedom. They each had their own individual usage. Essentially, Judgment of Light healed, Judgment of Wisdom gave mana, Judgment of Justice, what is it? How would I say it? Limited, that's the word I'm looking for. Limited the movement speed that people could go. So druids couldn't go in travel form. They would run at only 100% speed, their normal run speed. Shamans in Ghost Wolf, etc. It got its next change 2 years later in Cataclysm. They re-added as a replacement, or Judgment was re-added in a replacement for the judgments, the 3 judgments that I just said. Again, several months later, the judgments are now usable while silenced. I'm not sure if I like that. I feel like Judgment is a spell, so you shouldn't be able to use it, but again, that's in Cataclysm. Several months later, once again, at the end of Cataclysm, the Judgment no longer automatically targets a nearby enemy when the player attempts to activate it without a hostile target selected. Just a very minor fix, I guess. Got its next change in Mists of Pandaria a year later. It's renamed from Judgment to Judgment. What? Essentially, they took an E out of it. The middle E in Judgment, they took it out of the naming. Okay. And then that's just confused me. That threw me off course completely. I did not expect that sort of change. A few months later, it now costs 5% of your base mana. And then a few months after that, Judgment for Holy Paladins now costs 12% of their base mana to cast, up from 5. Now, I got a change in Warlords of Draenor. Judgment is now neutrally free for Holy Paladins, and neutrally generates 1 Holy Power for protection and Ret Paladins. The Retribution version no longer applies a physical vulnerability effect, and the physical vulnerability just increases the physical damage that they take. And it now costs 5% of your base mana for all Paladin specializations. It got a small hotfix a few days after this and just had its damage increased by 20%. And then a year later, its damage was increased by a further 8%. It was redesigned in Legion, so the tooltip... Oh, what was it redesigned as? I'm trying to find it. Looks like I can't. The tooltip for Judgment no longer incorrectly states that it hits 2 additional targets for Paladins without greater Judgment, and Judgment's damage on secondary targets should correctly match its damage on the primary target. So it basically became a AoE ability, or a cleave, I would say, not an AoE ability, because AoE is area of effect, and this does definitely not go into that category, like Consecration, Blizzards, Starfall, anything like that. But that is Judgment. I like the best change that they did was just renaming it from Judgment to Judgment. I think that is the best change that they've ever done in WoW's history, and yeah, I don't think that would ever be topped, to be honest with you. So, what are we looking forward to in Dragonflight? There's a lot of things that a lot of people might look forward to. A lot of people might look forward to the zones, the talents. They might look forward to the raiding. They might look forward to the PvP, a potential new arena, all kind of things. But ultimately, the 4 things that I've picked out are the talents, the zones, the professions, and the dragon riding. I'm going to start with talents, as it is the obvious one. Now, they are redesigning the talent trees, if you didn't know. They are going back to somewhat of the old talent tree system before Mists of Pandaria, and currently in Wrath of the Lich King Classic. It isn't that specific talent tree, but it is something along them lines where you'll get a point every level. You'll get, starting at level 10, you'll get a point for your class-specific tree, and then you'll get a point for your specialization-specific tree. So at level 10, you get the class one. At level 11, you get the specialization or the spec-specific tree talent, and it will keep doing that until you hit max level. Now, a lot of these things are locked behind, obviously, you need a certain amount of points in this, like, think of it in 3 sections. You need 8 points in order to go into section 2, and then you need another 8 points to go into section 3, and that kind of thing. That's how it works. And it all leads down into the spell, so you need this in order to get Convoke, say. But what's so good about this is that you can chop and change it, and there'll be very niche things that you can do in these talents that might make you better against a Death Knight, or better against a warrior, or a caster like a warlock or mage. Whereas the other talents that we had, you had the choice of 3, and generally, one of these was not good. One of these was the PvE version, the one that you pick for PvE, and 2 of these were decent. So let me give you an example. For Druids, Wild Charge and Renewal were both options that were viable in PvP. Now, I can't even tell you what's on that other line. What is on that same line for Druids? I cannot tell you what it is. I'm pretty sure it's Tiger's Dash. And that, again, is just not favourable in any sort of matchup, PvE or PvP-wise. So ultimately, you only have 2 choices. Whereas this talent system, now obviously there's going to be an optimal tree that you can do for PvP. Like, this is the best PvP tree. But you can change it slightly. You can mix it up. Instead of having a defensive build, like you take away Frenzy Regen, Auto Frenzy for Feral, and instead you gain more damage through a Convoke. So you're trading your defensive for your Convoke because you don't think that you're going to be the target, that kind of thing. It's instead of people switching out legendaries because they think that they're going to be the target. I know this is a big thing for Holy Paladins. So Holy Paladins have a couple of legendaries in Shadowlands, one of them being a tank legendary. When you get below a certain percentage, you take 50% reduced damage. I'm pretty sure it's 50% from Guardian of the Ancient Kings. Now, essentially, you would run this if you feel like you're going to be the target, and you wouldn't run this if you feel like you're not going to be the target. But this talent system allows you to, instead of switching out legendaries and spending however much gold that you've spent on these legendaries to actually make them, which was probably around the region of 50k, something like that, you know, anywhere between like 20k to 50k, 150k whenever you bought the legendary, because it would have been a lot pricier at the start of a patch, etc. But yeah, it means that you're firstly not out of pocket of gold, and secondly, you can change it to very unique circumstances. It's not just, oh, I'm tankier and I'm not tankier. It's, oh, I might have gained more utility in this way instead. I might be be able to kick something a bit quicker as a boomkin, because there's a talent that allows you to, if you interrupt something while they're casting it, it will reduce the cooldown of your solar beam, so you can get more utility this way. You can be more of a damage boomkin, you can be more of a defensive boomkin. It allows so many different play styles, which is absolutely amazing compared to the 3 choices that you have. And then even in them 3 choices, one of them is just shocking and not going to be needed. So the talents are really good at first glance. Some talent trees look better than others, I will say that. Looking at you, rogues, you kind of get everything. Gouge for every spec, even though you've got the best CC in the game. Yeah, some of them look better than others, I will say that. But it's going to be one of them things. It's something in an MMO that you're going to have to deal with. People have wanted these talents back for ages. Now, a lot of people are going to complain that this talent tree is too OP. You know, my class isn't OP enough. It's ridiculous. It's going to be a balancing nightmare. And a lot of specs and a lot of classes will obviously go up and down during this time in terms of favorability, who's in the meta, who isn't, what specs are dominant, which specs are broken. It's a numbers game, and they'll have to figure it out. But ultimately, I think in the long run, this will be better, because any spells that they want to bring in from old expansions, they can. essentially. Now, I know that they've done that already for, I think warriors are getting the Legion artifact one, rogues are getting like sepsis, druids are getting convoke. So a lot of the stuff has stayed into the game, but a lot of stuff that we've had in the past haven't. For example, Warlords of Draenor, I remember mages having the crystal. You put down a crystal and you pump damage into the crystal, and it does 30% more damage to enemies that are within 10 yards. So it's like there's so many spells that they've experimented with in the past. They could put into these talent like trees in a different version, like a very nullified version of it. Like the crystal could just be very good for an AoE build, essentially, if you wanted to do that for arcane mages. You know, there's so many things that they could do for these talents, and it will be good fun to see talents potentially getting updated after each expansion. Now, will they update them after each expansion? I imagine so. They might change a couple things, but I don't... It depends if we go up in level, essentially. Because if we keep going up in level, like we're going to level 70, so we get 10 extra points now. But if we go to level 80, then you got 10 extra points. They have to put something in, otherwise you're just going to be getting the entire bottom row. And then the same for level 90, 100. And then when you do the level squish, suddenly you're going to have to take away some of them talents because you literally won't be able to reach the bottom of the talent tree. It's one of them things. So we'll see in a few years' time, maybe a couple expansions' time, how the talent system has panned out. They might change it completely after Dragonflight. They might go for something a bit more refined and easier to manage as time goes on. But essentially, it's something to look forward to. It's a good breath of fresh air from the talents that we've had since Mists of Pandaria, which was... When was Mists of Pandaria? 2012? 10 years ago? Oh my god. That was 10 years ago. I remember that. Oh my god. Oh god. That's insane to realise. It really is. Wrath of the Lich King came out in 2008. Wow. It's crazy. It's crazy to think. Okay, so that's the talents, the zones. The zones, I'm going to talk about zones and Dragon Riding at the same time. We're getting, I think, 4 zones, 4 or 5 zones. I can't necessarily remember. But apparently these zones on the beta and the alpha or whatever are amazing. They are very big, landmass-wise. They are the biggest zones in the game, I believe. And this is to incorporate dragon riding. Now, what dragon riding is a new form of flying. We get it at the very start of the expansion, which is a massive breath of fresh air. But these zones are built for dragon riding. They're built to do dives down in order to keep your momentum so that you can go up and down and up and down. I just hit my notebook. As I talk, my hands are out in front of me doing gestures, going up and down and stuff like a little wave. So apologies for the book hitting. But yeah, essentially, dragon riding is going to be the main focus of the expansion. It is going to be the end point or the end focus of a lot of people's gameplay and game time. Mainly because in the previous expansions we've had Shadowlands, we've had BFA, Legion, nothing in I suppose in Warlords of Draenor. You know what? Warlords of Draenor is actually a great example. I'm going to go over this. Shadowlands, you had the legendaries. Ultimately, the legendaries cost you a lot of gold. They cost a lot of time to make, and if you wanted to switch spec or go on you're going to be paying a lot to essentially get that ult up and running. In Battle for Azeroth, you had your necklace, your Heart of Azeroth. Yeah, it was called Heart of Azeroth. And essentially you had your Azerite traits and you were always farming the specific traits that you needed because otherwise your class just wasn't as impactful. It wasn't as good. You weren't doing as much damage, DPS, etc. In Legion, you obviously had artifact weapons and you were constantly farming for that. All of these things, these 3 things, are related to player power. player power, and it's very simple. If you did not have these and working on them, your character would be worse. In Warlords of Draenor, everything was tied to the garrison. Now, a lot of people have their criticism on the garrison. I'm going to do something that's very out there and very frowned upon, but I will say I enjoyed the garrisons. In Warlords of Draenor, I remember hearing about them, I remember leveling, and then I remember when I first saw that garrison like prop up in the cutscene, where like you've got Yrel, I think, talking to you, and essentially saying congratulations and all of that. Now, the garrisons were very much cosmetic in terms of you got to kind of place where your buildings were. You can get certain things going, like work orders, I'm pretty sure, and, you know, stuff for your professions. But essentially, what you wanted to do was earn achievements, and these achievements gave you the ability to put statues into your garrison, and these were your sort of like crowning moments. It's like, look at what I've achieved. This statue shows what I've achieved, and you can have like 5 or 6 of these different ones, and that's amazing. And that was cosmetic. That wasn't what people were seeing. You can invite a couple people to your garrison, I'm pretty sure. I can't remember if you could or not. But essentially, that was just for you, for your pride. And it's like, I did that. I managed to do that achievement, and I'm so proud I did. And that was a cosmetic. What they're doing with dragon riding is cosmetics. So this is why I think it will be a huge success, because it's not going to be something that people have to farm in order to get their character up to date or more powerful or whatever. It is purely, you can farm it whenever you want, because you can farm how your dragon looks when you dragon ride. And if you don't farm anything, then it's not going to impact you at all. You might be a bit down because your dragon doesn't look as cool as you want, but that's about it. You can easily go and farm it in your own time, but it's not going to be a faster dragon. It's not going to be, you know, doing more damage if it ever does damage, which I don't believe it does, but, you know, it'd be quite cool to, like, land on something as you're diving and it one-shot them, because of just the force that you land on them. You know, it's just something to think about. It'll be quite cool. Obviously, you can't affect elites with it, because that would be a bit stupid. You just get people to dive bomb. But yeah, you know what I mean. Dragon riding is very cosmetic based, and the zones itself are very much built for dragon riding, where you can explore them, you can enjoy the small flights from getting the quest to going to complete the quest, all the way from, you know, going across from end to end of the zone, because it's so big, the zones, that it actually is very engaging, the flying, rather than just mounting up, flying high so that you don't hit into any mountains, pressing your numlock key and it automatically flying you straight. That's not interactive, that's not fun. You just sort of go on your phone after that and go through whatever social media you want. It's not as interactive. Dragon riding is obviously going to have some time trials with it as well. I'm pretty sure they were testing that out on the alpha towards the end. You know, it's a very fun prospect, and having these things in the game, like these sort of mechanics, are something that I'm very fond of. I've played a lot of Ark in my time, and Ark essentially does have this mechanic. I've said about this multiple times before, but it is very enjoyable and very engaging to have it. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is professions. Professions are getting a revamp, and it's not the best revamp, I must say. I think that they could do a lot with it, but essentially it's the start of giving professions some love in the game, because they have been neglected ever since, I think, around Wrath of the Lich King. They've just kind of been the same, very stale, very much, if I need it, I'll kind of just... It's not going to be that big of a deal, essentially. But professions now are working as though you're a tradesman. I would like to see it where you have to be within your certain like zone to order something. So you go to like a little zone in the city. I forget what the city name is in Dragonflight, but you go into a little zone and there's a blacksmithing like area, there's a tailor area, and you walk up to an NPC and you place your order there. Instead, you obviously just place an order through the professions tab. You do have to create stuff at your specific area though. So people who are doing tailorings have like looms. Is it looms? I'm pretty sure it's called looms. But yeah, they go to them and they can craft their stuff through that. But essentially, I want there to be a board. A sort of board that spans across every single, realm. And everyone posts what they need. And they post the mats that they have, or the mats that if you can provide, you will tip them for their service, that kind of thing. And if you're looking for work, you go up to this board and accept it. You accept the job and make it within a certain amount of time. Otherwise, that you will still be charged for the fee, or there's like a fee for picking it up if you do not complete it. So like 1,000 gold if you don't complete the work order, because it takes the work order down, so people won't have it up there for about 24 hours, that kind of thing. I don't know if like that made any sense, but it kind of does in my head. Essentially, I would like to see a lot more interaction between a lot of players, whether they're going up to a board to post what they can make or what they can offer, or what someone else is wanting that specific profession to make. So a blacksmith, I want this sword made. You go and post it on the board and you put it up there for 5 days. Someone takes it for a day. If they don't complete the work order, they have to pay up a certain charge because they didn't complete the work order, 1,000 gold or something, and the work order is put back up on that board automatically. But they can take the work order, they can make the sword, they can send it off to the person, and then the person receives it in the mail, and they have to COD, so cash on delivery, the person who made it, essentially. And they have to put on that board how much they are willing to pay, and if they are willing to supply the materials for it, or if the person who is making it has to supply the materials and they will just get paid a tip for making that certain item. I would like to see a lot more interaction with it, essentially. But from what I see, it's a step in the right direction, mainly because I think professions after Dragonflight will look to go into the more cosmetic making business. So instead of it being linked with player power, like I'm going to give an example, like Wrath of the Lich King. Engineering is very much player power at the moment. If you don't have engineering, your character is basically just worse in general. But I would like to see it move to stuff like the flying carpet for tailors, the turbocharged flying machine for engineers. You know, stuff like that I think is really cool because it allows you to collect mounts and cosmetics and items like that through alt characters that you wouldn't necessarily look to do a profession on. So there is a lot of things that you could do with professions, and I think they're sort of leading up to more with it, but at the moment it looks like it's a step in the right direction, and it looks like it will be good fun. But that is all for this week. Thank you all very much for listening. As always, do check out the Patreon for some ad-free podcasts up there constantly, as well as the Twitch and YouTube, as there are constant stuff happening on them platforms. Thank you once again, and go with Valor, friend. Goodbye all.